All right, we will go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to today's webinar on inclusivity. If you haven't met me, I'm Amy Brundle. I'm the Marketing Communications Manager here at NAMI, North Carolina, and we are so pleased to have everyone here for today's webinar. A couple of housekeeping items. If you have any questions for today's speakers, please put them in the Q&A section down below, or you can put them in the chat. We'll be monitoring both. We'll answer them towards the end of the presentation today. We'll also be sending out any materials that the speakers provide as follow-up, as well as this recording to everybody who's registered by the end of the week. So you will have that. And now I am honored to welcome today's special guests. Dr. Valencia Hicks-Harris is an award-winning educator, nonprofit leader, speaker, and founder of Empower All Incorporated and Empower All Consulting, which are organizations dedicated to advancing equity, wellness, and opportunity for underrepresented communities. She is a proud Raleigh native and has over 15 years of experience in education with a background that spans elementary classrooms, higher education, and research. And then we have Dr. Lorraine Wilson Batts, who has dedicated 18 years to healthcare with a passion for community and public health. She's passionate about meeting people where they are and ensuring they receive the healthcare that they need. As the nursing program manager at Duke Regional, Lorraine leads initiatives in professional and clinical development, mentoring thousands of new graduate nurses and advancing healthcare professions in their careers. And we are thrilled to have them both. Ladies, it's all yours.
Awesome. Well, first, I hope you all are excited and saying they don't look old enough that they have that many years of service behind them, but we do. So excited to be here. Welcome to our session today, The Power of Belonging, creating inclusive spaces that center wellness and connection. Righty. So a quick overview, beautiful bio about our backgrounds, but we wanted to take a brief moment and share our connection with NAMI. I was first introduced to NAMI during my doctoral research and looking at mental health wellness, identifying organizations that prioritize wellness more of a proactive way. And that is how I first came introduced to NAMI, especially with the youth mental health first aid training that I think anyone who works with young people should definitely receive that training. So introduced to them in a plethora of ways, excited to continue to build partnership any way that we can advance NAMI and ensure that more people know about the organization. That is what we are here to do. Dr. Lorraine?
Thank you. And I would like to just share that I have had the opportunity as being in healthcare to really work with some of our patients and community population that may have mental health issues. And also I get to work with the healthcare side of where we are working to meet the community where they are and address their healthcare needs, especially mental health. And so I've had the opportunity to participate in different NAMI activities. Also, I've done a lot of encouraging our healthcare staff to participate in NAMI activities so that we can have a plethora of healthcare professionals really engaging with community organizations for mental health. So we want to set the tone for today, and we want to talk about belonging. Belonging is not a program, and it is a practice rooted in wellness and care. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. It's not about fitting in, it's about becoming part of something and being an authentic self. So if you think about the word belonging, it's kind of come a little bit of a buzzword, but we want to really think about what those deep lived experiences of being seen, valued, and connected without condition. It means individuals are not just invited into a space, excuse me, but they are actively recognized, respected, and empowered to shape it. So as we really talk about belonging today, I want you to really think about how you have been in spaces throughout your lifetime of where you truly felt like you belonged. So we're going to take a moment and we're going to do a little bit of just some reflection. I want you to, excuse me, I want you to talk about what does true belonging feel like to you? And if you want to, you could feel free to put something in the chat, but just really take a moment to really think back and decide and think about those times of where belonging was something that was a feeling that you had, and what does it really look like or feel like to you? Being able to be vulnerable. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? So next we're going to talk about just another question to reflect on is, where have you experienced belonging, and or where have you longed for it? Were there places where you had to spend a lot of time and you didn't feel like you belong, or was there a place that you were spending a lot of time and you really felt like you belong and you could really let your hair down? Anyone want to share in the comments about where you've experienced it? Well, as you think and reflect on it, I want us to, oh, someone said here in NAMI. So exactly. Thank you for sharing that. That is a great place. NAMI is a great starting point for us to come together of like-minded people, and we can hopefully take this information and share it with our the rest of our community. Someone mentioned belonging in friend groups within college. Great. These are great examples. In high school, someone longed to feel like they belonged. So today we're going to talk about this. There's no right or wrong answers. We want just your honest reflections, and this will kind of help us ground ourselves in the reality of what that belonging looks like, and that it isn't something that we schedule, it's something that we nurture together. And starting now, we will really take initiative on doing that.
All righty. So I didn't drop mine in the chat, but again, you will notice that I am an elementary educator through and through. So I immediately began thinking about kindergartners entering into school for the first time. So when they bust through those doors and into those classroom spaces, they center belonging and no one is left out. And I just hope that we can channel that in our adult lives and in the workspaces that we are in. All right, so when we talk about NAMI and understanding, as Lorraine shared, that belonging is not a program that is rooted in wellness and in care, one thing that we want to bring attention to is that NAMI truly elevates the voices of individuals with mental health conditions, ensuring that their stories inform the programs, policy, the culture, and creating environments where people feel seen, heard, and valued. So centering those lived experiences. Also, providing education and awareness through their one-on-one workshops. NAMI truly equips communities and schools and workplaces at all levels, from Wake County Public School System partnerships to university partnerships, and in the community that truly help emphasize and support mental wellness for all. Advocating for equitable access is very important. Pushing for the policies that remove barriers to care, especially for those who are often silenced or lived in the margins. Reinforcing the equity in mental health access is a cornerstone for inclusion. Also, identifying some peer support spaces. So it is important for us, for Lorraine and I, to always co-present and co-lead topics such as this, because that peer-to-peer and family support and group models, they help show what inclusive spaces can look like in non-judgmental ways, affirming everyone of their journey. And lastly, offering workshops and organizational training. So again, shout out to NAMI and NAMI partners, and for partnering with organizations that foster cultures of psychological safety to reduce stigmas, integrating wellness and strategies to help leaders and staff and all who are involved understand that inclusion isn't possible without mental health support. So in our time today, it is our hope that you all as participants, thank you, understand the deep connection between belonging, innovation, mental health, and wellness. There will be periods of time throughout the session today that we will ask you to reflect, reflect on your personal and organizational practices that impact inclusion. We hope that we will also not leave you with the now what, but provide you with actionable tools that foster belonging, authentic connection, and that psychological safety. And hopefully, we will inspire you towards centering wellness as a fundamental cultural value aligned with principles championed by organizations like NAMI. All righty, so let's dive right in. Even before I begin sharing, it's presented here on the screen that belonging is not about inclusion into a pre-existing system. It's about transforming the system so people feel whole, welcome, and essential. But I want to ask you, if you'll drop in the chat, how do you define belonging? The deep feeling of being accepted. Awesome. How about one more? Remember, the elementary teacher has great wait time. Okay, as you're thinking, we like to elevate that belonging is more than a trending term or a buzzword or organizational initiative or a hot topic. It's a commitment to true transformation. So we want to make sure that it's not transactional, but transformative. It's not a one-time event. It's a daily lived practice. It shows up in the tone of our conversations, the spaces we design, the decisions we make, and the norms we reinforce. We must also root ourselves in wellness and care, that compassion. It means recognizing that people don't just leave their personal challenges at the door, and they shouldn't have to. Now, as a classroom educator, there are many times where you sometimes have to turn off and turn things back on when you cross that threshold, but it's almost impossible not to carry some of your personal baggage into the spaces that you enter. True belonging demands that we tend to the wholeness of people, or I like to say fully human, acknowledging identities, honoring those lived experiences, and ensuring we're not merely surviving, but thriving. To practice belonging, that means that we build environments in which people don't have to earn acceptance. They're embraced for who they are, nor do they have to conform to be something that they don't want to be in those spaces. Care is demonstrated, not declared, through those policies, actions, and accountability. Again, policies, actions, and accountability. When it comes to mental, emotional, and communal well-being, that should be prioritized alongside of productivity and performance. We should have relationships that are centered over transactions because trust and empathy and connection, full sustainability. Power should be shared and not hoarded, ensuring that everyone has a voice, visibility, and value. In short, belonging is not about asking people to fit into pre-existing structures. It's about transforming the structure itself so people feel whole, feel welcome, and essential to the community's fabric.
So we're going to talk, excuse me, we're going to talk about a few key principles. These are the core ingredients that we know to create that true belonging, especially in spaces focused on wellness, education, advocacy, and that community building. So the first one we're going to talk about is visibility. How are we making people be seen? They must not be overlooked. They're not tokenized and not made to be feel invisible. It's about recognizing individuals as they are, including their identities, experiences, their struggles, their strengths. And visibility says you're not hidden here, you're known here. In thinking about our next principle, value, value is beyond being seen, but also feeling valued. That your presence, your contribution, your lived experiences, what you bring to the table is respected and it's also meaningful. It's not enough to say that everyone matters. We must actively show how the people on our team and their uniqueness and their strengths in the space matter. We also want to say that value is about you are important here and you bring what you bring cannot be replaced by someone else because it's so unique to you. Also, we have here the voice. The voice with belonging, it's to say that people have agency. They have the ability to share their ideas, they can share their needs, the stories, their perspectives without any fear. We want them to feel open to share. Also, their voice is about creating room for participation, for feedback, influence, not just attendance. We don't want people coming into the space to say, oh, well, they were there. No, they brought something to the room and they were able to share that and use their voice. So voice is saying that you're heard here and what you say can help shape our space. We also have the next piece of just that psychological safety. This is the foundation that holds it all together, and people must feel emotionally and mentally safe to show up authentically. That psychological safety means that people can speak honestly, they can take risk, admit mistakes, and be vulnerable. We had a mention earlier about being vulnerable without fear of humiliation, punishment, or exclusion. That psychological safety, it just says you are safe here to be real, to grow, and to exist fully. So as we look at these key principles, I want us just to take a moment to say that visibility, I see you. Value, I honor you. Voice, I hear you. And with that psychological safety, I protect your right to be here. And these are the 4 things that are essential for the conditions to help moving belonging from just a buzzword to a lived daily practice. And so as we think about this and you really look in on these key principles, I want to just have Valencia share a little bit more about how NAMI and their connection can connect with these 4 principles.
True vulnerability right here. So as Lorraine was sharing, I wrote it down again. The visibility, I see you. The value, I honor you. The voice, I hear you. And psychological safety, I protect your right to be here. How refreshing does that feel to hear one share that out loud and also to embody that in all spaces that we enter? So we think about mental health challenges that are compounded by isolation, visibility, or excuse me, invisibility and disconnection. I think about NAMI because NAMI also emphasizes that proactive approach. When individuals don't feel seen or valued or included, it can deepen the experiences of anxiety, depression, and burnout. And boy, do we hear about burnout all the time, especially in high stress environments, in workplaces, possibly in schools and community systems and society as a whole. So that's why it is important for us to center belonging and where belonging comes in. It's not a luxury, but it's a protective factor. Helps to set those clear boundaries. Belonging creates emotional safety, reminds people that you matter, your voice counts, you're not alone. And when people feel connected, when people feel supported and affirmed, their capacity to cope and engage and heal increases. I imagine a world where we all do some collective healing. So with NAMI's approach to mental health, it's deeply relational, whether it's through peer-led support groups, the educational programs, or advocacy efforts. They model what it looks like to build spaces where mental wellness and belonging go hand in hand. So when we talk about inclusion or well-being, we can't treat them as separate conversations. Belonging isn't a soft concept. It's a strategy for resilience. It reduces the emotional toll and helps people, again, you'll hear me say it all afternoon, helping people to survive or just not only survive, but thrive. Thrive professionally, personally, and communally. Let's pause for another quick reflection. When was the time that you felt a true belonging? And how did it affect your mental wellness? Think about it. You can drop it in the chat, or jot it on your notes, old school like me, paper and pencil. And I'll repeat that question. When was the time you felt true belonging, and how did it affect your mental wellness? All right, I'm with like-minded folks. Spending time with family definitely allows you to rest for sure. True belonging at a previous employment built confidence and helped to accept yourself. Powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. My most recent example, last night I went to a talk on mental health, and the way people opened up, shared their stories and vulnerability definitely refueled my tank. So sometimes attending conferences, hopping on webinars, depending on the topic, oftentimes you can find like-minded individuals, right, that will truly support you. All right.
So let's take a moment to do some more reflection of our role in shaping this space. We all know that we may have different roles in our family, in our workplace, in our community, but we all have a role in shaping the space and assisting with that belonging. So the first question that I'll just ask, and some of these you can rapid fire kind of some answers or just some self-reflection. But how do I intentionally create space for others to feel seen, heard, and valued? What actions do you take? Let's focus on the awareness of your positive actions and practices. As you're thinking, let's put a name to some of those ways that we actually support others' visibility, their value, their voice, even if it's a small gesture. Something that I am very big on is I like to speak to people and call them by their name so that they know that I see them, I know you, and I want to hear from you. So that is a simple action of just learning people's names so that you can use that when you want to help welcome them in. Asking questions about others, showing that you're interested in knowing them. Yes. And as we're speaking about that, there are some of our people that are in our spaces, whether meetings, whether just in the area, that may be quieter. So offering them an opportunity to actively invite them into the conversation so that they know that your thoughts are welcome. We do want to hear from you. Another simple thing to do is just making eye contact with someone. Looking at them to say that I see you, I'm looking at you, and I want to hear from you. Also, acknowledging diverse perspectives without judgment, speaking to that there are some that may feel differently. We'd love to hear from you. Provide warm beverages and snacks when anyone comes into the office, as well as a comfy chair and 100% of your attention. Those are great examples. Sometimes people just need some nourishment, and that can help them feel like they belong because you are willing to bring them in and nourish them of some sort. Also, another simple thing is having a discussion with the group and setting some of those norms. How can we make sure that we set the norm to prioritize care and respect with those that we're working with? Another question is, where might I intentionally create exclusion and stress for others? So this is where I really want us to talk a moment about our blind spots. What areas do we have for growth? There's always room for us to do better. And it could be that you're comfortable with this within this group and one new person comes and we just forget that, hey, we have to remember to reset and open and welcome others into the group. So this is where we want to honestly acknowledge any patterns that might cause harm, even without malicious intent. If you have any examples that you want to share, feel free to put those in the chat. Some that Valencia and I kind of talked through before was making assumptions on people about their identity because of how they look or how you may identify them. Is it fair to make assumptions on them? Also, using language that could exclude. We have someone that shared forgetting to check your privilege no matter what it may be. Yes, as we're thinking of inclusive spaces, sometimes there's power in rooms that may not be stated, but the power exists. And so making sure that you take a moment to acknowledge, whether verbally or just you notice yourself, there may be a privilege that I'm speaking from that others may not have. And that's where you can go to what we talked about before, was taking a moment to intentionally ask others. I can speak from my perspective, but I'd love to hear from someone else who has a different perspective. Some other things are rushing through discussions without allowing space for questions or concerns. If we don't allow for those questions or concerns, can we really say that this was a group decision? If we are ignoring emotional cues that someone may be showing to say that they are unsafe or unwelcome. If we're in a room with people, sometimes when we're on virtual, we may not be able to see those cues, but when we're in a space and someone is giving us those cues, are we taking a moment to acknowledge them? Also, one other thing is just dominating conversations, interrupting, not allowing people to finish their thoughts. Thank you all for sharing your comments. I think these are really great for us to think about and just take a moment to really see where am I opening and welcoming others, and then where are my blind spots? Where are times that I unintentionally are not opening the door for people to feel like they could belong? Valencia, I'll turn it over to you for our systems check.
All right. Well, in the spirit of making sure that we are not hypocritical, we're going to take a quick pause and check in. Take maybe like the next 30 seconds or so to reflect on what Lorraine just shared, or anything that we shared previously. And if you have any questions at this time, go ahead and jot them down. And know that at the end of our presentation, we have included time and space for a Q&A. But we're going to take a quick pause, just for you all to jot down any questions that you may have. All righty, this is where I wish Zoom had the elevator music. All right, or especially with so that we can't see your faces, but we'll keep moving. We'll move on to system checks, what helps versus what hurts. All right, I'm gonna have you buckle up, grab your pen and pencil, get ready to jot down some notes. I'll try my very best to make sure that I don't go through this too fast, because it will be kind of heavy with information to take in. So as we unpack what helps versus what hurts, we have to think about what that really means. It's about bringing a conscious attention to the real impact of our actions, our words, and structures that we have on others. It frames belonging and safety and connection through behaviors, making it easier to recognize and shift. Here's what it asks. What are the small and big things that create safety, connection, and empowerment? What hurts? It moves us from theory, belonging is good, to practical reflection and action. What helps? Intentional acts that create visibility, value, voice, and psychological safety. Can you think of some examples of what helps? If you don't mind, once again, drop those in the chat. Asking open-ended questions and inclusive questions. What are your thoughts? Instead of, does anyone have a problem with this? So shifting your language. Pausing to genuinely listen, not just respond. Pausing to genuinely listen, not respond. I know at times I'm guilty of going ahead and thinking about my response as someone else is still talking, but knowing that it's okay to take a pause and breathe. Sharing power, letting others lead, shape, or decide, and being consistent and following through truly builds trust and ties back into what we discussed earlier, accountability. All right. Lorraine, do you mind unmuting and sharing what was dropped in the chat?
Yes. So in the chat, we have having ample time in a meeting for all of our participants to share, giving that space for everyone to be able to have a voice. And I think this is a great example of when we have meetings, if we have such a tight agenda, therefore we may not allow for questions or discussion. And is that really allowing for a welcoming, belonging space for people to feel like they can share their thoughts?
Awesome.
Also, actually considering diverse perspectives rather than just dismissing them.
That's a
So
good one.
considering that others may think differently, have different experiences and or different perspectives about situations or what we're working on.
All right. Were there any others before I move on? Okay, let's discuss what hurts. Unintentional or intentional actions that create exclusion, anxiety, silence, or harm. Or like we say, intent versus impact. Can you think of some examples of what hurts? And once again, you can feel free to drop those in the chat. All right, as you're dropping those in, I will share. Dismissing or interrupting someone's ideas, centering only dominant perspectives or voices, overlooking contributions or not giving credit, moving too fast for reflection or emotional processing, using humor or a language or behavior that alienates or others people. All righty. Once again, anything dropped in the chat?
Yes. So in the chat, not feeling like your voice is heard because one person is making all those decisions. Cultural ignorance and or insensitivity.
All right. Was there anything else in there?
No.
Okay, awesome. All right. So once again, here are some questions for you to think about. What practices or systems promote belonging and emotional well-being? Another question to ponder. What practices or systems unintentionally cause harm or increase isolation? Take a moment, think about those things. No pressure, but you are always welcome to drop those responses in the chat. Again, those questions were, what practices or systems promote belonging and emotional well-being? What practices or systems unintentionally cause harm or increase isolation? All right, so with the first question that discusses the practices that promote belonging and emotional well-being, I immediately think about psychological safety that's embedded in policy. having clear, transparent, anti-bias, anti-harassment policies that are enforced fairly, having the norms that protect space for vulnerability, shared leadership in decision-making, communities and leadership teams that reflect community diverse thought, decision-making processes that are transparent, collaborative, and inclusive. I'm a fan of co-creating things, that we do things with one another, not for someone else. Ongoing learning and growth structures, regular and meaningful learning around the topic, especially belonging, not just a one-off presentation, right? So definitely this should be an ongoing conversation. Offering mentorship, coaching, or peer support, having those networks available is vitally important. Having a wellness infrastructure, having the access to the mental health resources, counselors, workshops, and so forth. And built-in practices that value rest. Rest is in resistance, reflection, and renewal. Belonging and emotional well-being are not accidental. They are built through intentional practices and supported by systemic structures that center care, center safety and inclusion every single day. The second question discussed what practices or systems unintentionally cause harm and increase feelings of isolation. And as I unpack this, here are a few things that came to mind. Exclusive communication styles, speaking in jargon or insider language that newcomers don't understand. In the world of education, we have acronyms for everything, right? So being able to have the translation available, talking over or interrupting others, plain and simple, it's rude. Only engaging with familiar or favorite voices in meetings. This can result in people feeling invisible, unworthy, and disconnected. Performative inclusion, saying things like everyone is welcome without creating real pathways for participation. Hosting events or initiatives that appear inclusive, but do not change day-to-day practices. Highlighting only a few voices for appearance's sake, valuing their input in decision-making. As a result of this, people feel used rather than valued, deepening distrust, which also can lead to burnout. Sometimes there's an overemphasis on productivity, if we're honest. Prioritizing tasks and deadlines over emotional check-ins or meaningful relationships. Rewarding overwork while ignoring signs of burnout or mental distress. Penalizing vulnerability or requests for mental health support. And as a result of these things, people can begin to suppress their needs, become disengaged, and isolate themselves emotionally. One size fits all approaches. The only thing we need one size is like those pajama onesies, right? But not in our approaches in the workplace. Offering programs or initiatives that assume everyone's needs and experiences are identical. Failing to account for some things that we may have been told not to discuss. What am I talking about? Failing to account for those racial, cultural, neurodiverse, or accessibility differences. Implementing solutions that overlook systemic barriers, which then can result in people feeling, once again, unseen, misunderstood, and disconnected. Ignoring or mishandling conflict. Some people may be conflict adverse and run from it, but what ends up happening is that avoiding difficult conversations, in the name of keeping peace, allowing microaggressions, bias, or exclusion to go unaddressed, minimizing or dismissing people's experiences when harm occurs, can result in individuals to withdraw for self-protection. And lastly, systems that unintentionally cause harm or isolation. These are policies and structures and norms that reinforce exclusion even when intentions seem positive. We're talking about rigid hierarchies that have a lack of transparency about how decisions are made or whose voices are considered, lack of that wellness infrastructure, which can mean no accommodations for grief or trauma or caregiving or rest, punitive systems when mistakes are punished rather than used as opportunities for learning and for growth, or hashtag just being human for making a mistake, which results in individuals operating from fear rather than from a place of creativity or that authentic connection. So in summary, harm and isolation often arise not from bad intentions, but from unexamined practices, rigid systems, and missed opportunities to center care, to center trust, and human connection. Awareness is the first step towards real change.
Thank you for sharing those. I think I would like for us to just take a moment to pause because those were some very heavy topics, but things that as we look to really examine, as you mentioned, examine our practices and our systems, I want us to just take a breath with that and just really take a moment. After hearing all of those, I would like for us to move on to our next step, which is our actionable items. As we're thinking about those inclusive spaces, and we talked so far about what belonging was, we also talked about how we can create those spaces intentionally and things that we may be doing unintentionally that are blocking that belonging. And hearing those last barriers, let's talk about those actionable tools that each of us can take. So we can start with just inclusive language. Some examples of that are people first language, avoiding any stigmas around mental health, around any other issues, but using that inclusive language. We'd like to hear from the group, not we'd like to hear from one person. What does everyone have to say? Those are ways to have just those inclusive language practices. We also have wellness as a cultural non-negotiable. We all, in order to thrive and do our best, need to be well. And how can we do that is if we make this a culture of non-negotiable for wellness. So this can be normalizing mental health days, using those trauma-informed practices, and really making sure we are checking in with our group, those around us, to just to see, are you well? How are you? What is going on? Would you like to share, or do you just need a moment to step back? Another actionable tool is building feedback loops that honor all voices. So this is having surveys, this is having town halls, restorative practices, where we can kind of just circle back to make sure we had our meeting, we weren't able to listen or hear from everyone, but let's take a moment and through this survey, if you have any other thoughts, please feel free to share those. Or maybe having where you have conversations where then you talk about it. For those that need time to process, we don't make a decision then. We set time on our next agenda to make that decision. Also, we can do some co-creation, not necessarily a top-down design, but really involving all of those that may be involved. Not just having leaders make these decisions, but really having where a group is allowed to make the decisions. where those that have different perspectives can come together to make that decision. An example of that is kind of involving community and policy and program development. If we're saying we want to create something for the community, are we taking a moment to ask those from the community? How can we just create a space? I'm hoping that you all are finding these as great action items for you to just look at the different areas and where you are, where you engage in, and do these practices exist? And if not, how can you just take one and encourage the implementation of these? So I want to just take a moment to remind you all, you're not just building spaces, you're building safety, resilience, and community health. Also, belonging protects our well-being, and we should not allow it to be a non-negotiable. So I want to know and hear from you all, how do you feel like your work that you do, and how does that connect to belonging? Valencia and myself have great examples of how we, in any space we go to, make sure we offer an opportunity of, can we hear from everyone? Is this a decision for all? So taking time and just reflecting on the spaces you go to, and it may be that for the next week or so, you just use this as an opportunity just to watch and really think about what we talked about today and say, I'm going to watch over the next week or so what is happening. And then you can start to take note of what's happening in your space. Sometimes it's so much happening we don't see it, but this is where we can really look at it. We have in the chat a comment about we try to have an open door for all, literally and figuratively. I like that. And I'm assuming by literally you mean the door is open. If we're saying that we want to hear from others, we have doors that are open and or no door, so that people don't feel like there's something blocking them from sharing their thoughts. Lindsay, I think we will move on just so we have time for questions.
All right. Awesome. I get so excited when I'm listening as if I wasn't part of this presentation. But anyway, all right. So here's honestly, this is not like NAMI has not paid us to shout them out, and know that we are sharing this information from an authentic space. So what I really love about NAMI across Wake County and North Carolina, that it doesn't just offer support, it builds infrastructure. They show us what's possible when we move from awareness to action, from silence to voice, from exclusion to belonging. I believe that their approach is one that I centered, again, in all classroom spaces from elementary to higher ed, that early intervention, inclusive support, and systemic change are central. They are very important. And so as we look at that, and as all the things that we have discussed with you all this afternoon, and time has flown by, we ask that you all think about one small action item that you will take to build belonging and center mental wellness in your spaces. Even if you start this at home first. In our homes, we are our realest selves, right? So if we practice that in our homes and carry that forth into our workspaces, what would that look like? So I would ask you to, again, ask yourself, what is one small action item that you will take to build belonging and center mental wellness? Right. If you'll advance the next slide. All right. So we want to close with this. Again, as Lorraine shared earlier, and I reiterate, you're not just building spaces, you are building safety, resilience, and community health. Belonging protects well-being, so let's all make it a non-negotiable. At this time, we will turn it over and open it up to you all for any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, both of you, for a truly enlightening conversation. I think I want to start things off by just asking one of my own. Um, where have you all had, like, in your work, whether with, your paid work or volunteer work or work with NAMI, have you found this to be like a particular challenge for you? Like, as you're trying to kind of build some of this in your own spaces, what has been some of the challenging parts for you about building belonging in those spaces?
Yes, so I'll go ahead and answer first. So I would say that in healthcare, as we have a lot of healthcare policy that exists and has been around for a long time, whether it's within our hospital health system, whether it's in the state policy and or national policy, what we're finding is just some of the way the language is written, it's not very inclusive and it can be very rigid. Along a lot of the systems can be very rigid, and that makes it where it's very difficult because of if we're thinking, and this policy is meant to assist the community. Was it written with the community in mind, or is it written for the staff that have to work with that population? Who is it really written for? And a lot of times I'm finding it wasn't really written for the community. It was
Hmm.
written on the other end. And so that's kind of the challenge that I'm seeing a lot is trying to bring forth that attention, but also knowing that policy work and creation takes a long time.
Hmm.
So even with ideas and the community saying this policy doesn't work for us, what is the true action item of the length of time to even change it, fix it, address it?
Hmm.
Yes, I think Lorraine said it best. And, if I'm quite honest and vulnerable, our current policies that have recently come out with the erasure of certain policies have people scrambling at a place of fear, fearful of what to say, what not to say. And I tell people all the time that I function in a place of telling the truth and focusing on the human centered or human designed work, right? That I am advocating for all of us collectively as individuals.
Yeah, I think a lot of that can be difficult to know how to express and amplify other people's voices without, drawing undue attention, especially in this climate. Well, I wanted to thank you both very much for this talk. I think this is something incredibly important for all of us to keep in mind because the work that NAMI does is so crucial to so many different types of communities, and we need to keep in mind that the people that we're serving most likely are not going to fully look and sound and think and act like us, and so we need to make spaces that are very open for a multitude of different persons. I wanted to just thank you both for being here, for sharing this topic. We'll be sending out the recording to everybody who registered so that everybody can have this information and can refer back to it. Also, if there's anything else that you guys want to provide to our listeners, then just send that to me and I will be happy to forward that along. Um, if you have any feedback about today's event, please feel free to reach out to either Lynn Allen, our community and affiliate support manager, or myself. We'd love to know what you thought. Otherwise, thank you all for being here and go make your spaces more inclusive.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.